All right, here we go. Hi, Karen.
Hi.
Let's see here. Welcome to a demonstration. Tonight I'll be showing you how to upgrade the CPU in a desktop computer like this one. I built this one about 6 years ago, and so now it's getting a little bit slower, and I'm looking to increase the performance of it in a way that's a little more cost effective than buying a whole new computer. And this might seem intimidating, but it's really pretty easy once you get down to it. A computer's a lot like a set of Legos that only goes together one way. So without further ado, let's get into it. First things first, we're going to want to unplug your computer from everything, obviously, and then take off the side panel here. Make sure that you touch the metal of your computer before you touch any of the internal components to make sure that you don't accidentally discharge static electricity onto those. And it's a good idea not to be wearing wool or to be standing on carpet while you do this. So now we're at the inside of the computer and we can see the internal components here. We've got the graphics card, the power supply, some hard drives. The CPU is under this fan and the motherboard is in the back there. So to get to the CPU, we're going to have to take up this fan first, which is pretty simple. There's just one power cable, and that just comes unplugged by pulling on it. And then there's 4 connectors, one on each corner of the fan, that just twist off. And they're pretty easy to get off, but it does take a little bit of fiddling, so I'll cut back to that when I'm done. Once you have your fan out, you'll be able to see the CPU right in there. And you'll see it's got a gray, slimy looking thing on it, and that's the thermal paste. That helps keep it cool. So the next step is to get some isopropyl rubbing pads and just wipe it off. The alcohol helps dissolve it a little bit and makes it come off a little bit easier if you just use water. And the other thing is if you just use water, you run the risk of getting your computer wet. That's not good. Alcohol evaporates so quickly that it never will hurt anything in there. So you get that surface nice and clean, and you're going to have to do the same thing on the surface of the fan, because both of these surfaces need to be very clean to effectively transmit the heat. Alright, so once you have the CPU cleaned off and the fan cleaned off as well, you need to remove the CPU from the motherboard so that you can get your new one in. And so the first step, you'll see that the CPU is held down by a little latch there on the side. You can see the little wire, and that you just press it down and pop it out, and it unlatches the CPU, and you just fold it back and lift the CPU straight out. You want to lift it straight out because there's a bunch of pins on the bottom of it, and those can get bent if you don't lift it straight out. So you lift it straight out, and there's no problems. And I have extremely shaky hands, and I did this just fine. I don't know if you can see this, but it's really not so bad. Your new CPU is going to come in some packaging like this, and I like to reuse that to store the old one in. So now that we've got the old CPU out, we can go ahead and put our new one in, and you'll see it looks almost exactly like the old one. And these processors have a little triangle mark on one corner. That right there. And that's so you know, and that little triangle mark shows you the orientation that needs to go in the socket. And there's a little triangle inside of the socket as well that you line that up with. So you take it, line up the triangle, and again, try and set it straight in so as not to bend the pins. Now that it's in, you can latch it back down, doing the reverse of the previous process that I described. If you have your new processor installed, you're going to need to apply some thermal paste. And to do that, you're going to take your thermal paste, and you're just going to apply about a small pea-sized amount in the center of the CPU. And there's no need to spread it around, contrary to what the internet might have you think. Because if you spread it around, you'll introduce some air pockets into the thermal paste, and that makes it less thermally effective. So once you have it in there, you just take your fan, you line it up with the holes in the motherboard, and you just set it right down on top of the thermal paste. And the act of setting it down spreads out the thermal paste evenly over the die and makes it work as efficiently as possible. Once that's on there, you just turn the 4 fasteners on the corners, just like taking it out, and plug it into the motherboard, and you're ready to go. Hopefully this video made computer repair a little bit less intimidating for you. It's really quite straightforward, and it can be a fun and rewarding little project that only takes about 20 minutes and can have some real measurable effects. If you you have any questions, there's a multitude of great guides online, and I really hope that you try something along these lines one day. Thanks, and have a good night.